All right, it's time for some more college football spring game reaction. And up today, I'm going to talk about the Texas Longhorns spring game and the Oklahoma Sooners spring game from this past weekend. Good morning, it's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou, live on LouTube for you. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it also. And two, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year. And believe it or not, some of them are even watchable. I don't know about this one. You can let me know in the comments down below how good or bad of a job you think I do on this video here, talking about Texas and Oklahoma spring game. Don't forget to call-in show tonight at 9 o'clock every Tuesday and Thursday night. Live call-in show right here on this channel. We talk college football. Come check it out. Let's start with Texas. Now, to be fair, when it comes to Texas and Oklahoma, I am higher on Texas heading into the season, like preconceived notions or whatever as far as what I think about the two teams. I'm a little higher on Texas heading into next season than I am Oklahoma. Texas obviously won their conference last year, the Big 12. They did lose to Oklahoma last year, though. And Texas, of course, made their first trip to the playoffs. Texas and Oklahoma are both headed to the SEC for the 2024 season. And while that's not necessarily the point of this video, it's worth keeping that in mind when you're thinking about Texas and Oklahoma, how they may do in the 2024 season, and how much you base on the spring game or whatever the case may be. But let's start with Texas. Quinn Ewers didn't play that much. But here's the thing about spring games, at least to me. Spring games is about trying to answer questions you might have about a team from one season to the next, right? So you've always got a bunch of new players, whether you're talking about high school recruits who early enrolled freshmen, right? And now with the transfer portal being what it is, whether you love it or hate it, in a lot of cases when you're watching these teams in the spring, you might have a junior or a senior, but he's a first-time player at that particular school. So for me, when I watch spring games, it's about the new people, right? How do they look? Are there any freshmen that could potentially have impacts on this year's version of the team? Because most freshmen don't play right away. Some do. Very few start. Some play in a backup role or in a complementary role. But you watch a spring game and you sort of know what you're getting from some players or some positions. And the quarterback situation at Texas is a great example of this, right? Do we really need to see Quinn Ewers do that much in the spring game? We've seen the guy play for 2 years at the college level. We kind of know what he is. And what he is a really good college quarterback. Is he great? Is he elite? Is he a Heisman Trophy contender? Does he have a chance to win the Heisman Trophy? Now, maybe those are some fair questions to ask. Is he good or great? Is he a Heisman contender or not? But in terms of like watching the spring game because you don't know what kind of quarterback you're going to get with Quinn Ewers, you know what you're going to get. Now, they've got a ton of turnover at the wide receiver position, right? So maybe you want to see how Quinn Ewers is connecting with those new wide receivers or what type of chemistry maybe they've developed over the course of the offseason. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see a lot of that in the Texas spring game. Now, to be fair, I did not watch the Texas spring game live. It was on the Longhorn Network. So like everyone else, I didn't watch it because no one watches the Longhorn Network. It's the worst sports streaming network in the history of sports streaming networks. But I did go back and watch a recapped version of the game on YouTube, and I read some articles from both Texas sources and outside sources. So Quinn Ewers didn't play that much. I think he only played 2 series in this game, and you can take from that whatever you want. He played 2 series. Again, I don't need to see Quinn Ewers do anything. There's no questions in my mind that need to be answered about Quinn Ewers. Arch Manning, though, on the other hand, while not a starter this year for Texas, we have to keep in mind, whatever you think about Quinn Ewers in terms of how good he's been or not, I think he's been pretty good. He's been hurt in both seasons that he's been the starter at Texas and has missed games in both seasons. I think he's missed 5 or 6 games over the last 2 years. Now, Texas had Malik Murphy last year that they put in, who was sort of a more experienced backup, whereas Arch Manning was the true freshman last year. It's not the case this year. Malik Murphy has transferred out. And so Arch Manning is the true backup number 2 quarterback at Texas. So if anything happens to Quinn Ewers, whether it be injury or just really bad performance or whatever the case, anytime they go to a quarterback that's not Quinn Ewers, regardless of the reason, it's going to be Arch Manning. And we got to see a ton of Arch Manning in this game for Texas. And he looked really, really good. It was over 300 yards, several touchdowns. He completed at a high percentage. Now, it's a spring game, and so the same disclaimer we make in every video when we talk about spring games, you can't draw a line from what somebody does in a spring game to what they will do in the fall, right? Doesn't mean he'd pick apart any defense he plays if he were the starting quarterback. But if you're just looking at this game in a bubble, Arch Manning played really, really well. Does that mean he's threatening Quinn Ewers' starting position? No, I don't think so. I don't know anybody that really thinks that. Sarkisian said as much after the game in his post-spring game interview. Quinn Ewers is going to be the starting quarterback barring injury or some sort of catastrophic drop-off in production from Quinn Ewers, which I don't see happening, despite the loss of wide receivers. Now, let's talk about Texas wide receivers and how they looked in the game. They lost several key pieces from that offense last year at the wide receiver position. A couple of them gone off to the NFL. They're going to replace that with a combination of returning backups, true freshmen, and transfers. They got Isaiah Bond, and I'm drawing a blank on that. What's the true freshman's Ryan Wingo. Sorry, I drew a blank there. Ryan Wingo, 5-star wide receiver. Everybody wanted him. Widely considered the second or third best wide receiver in this past year's draft class, behind obviously Jeremiah Smith, who went to Ohio State. But you're talking about a 6'2" guy, over 200 pounds, can jump, can make all the catches. He looked good in the game. Now, again, catching mostly passes from Arch Manning, as Quinn Ewers only played the 2 series. But I thought the wide receivers looked pretty good. Isaiah Bond, he didn't have a great game in terms of stats, but they targeted him a lot. And he's clearly going to be a starting wide receiver for Texas, the transfer from Alabama. I think Wingo's going to play a lot. I think he's too talented to keep off of the field. And considering the fact that Texas lost most of their starting production from that wide receiver room last year, there is room for a talented true freshman like Wingo to get onto the field early. I think Texas is going to be fine offensively. The running back situation, they got to stay healthy, which was something they couldn't do last year, and the offensive line is going to have to come through for them, and they probably need to improve a little bit on the offensive line. And Sarkisian mentioned this in a post-game press conference as well, that they are looking to the portal again. We're in another portal window season here, sort of post-spring game portal window, and Sarkisian mentioned that he's looking to get better basically along the lines of scrimmage. I think the phrase he used was big humans. We're looking around the portal for some more big humans, is the way he put it, obviously talking about the lines of scrimmage. And over on the defensive side of the ball, if you're looking at the units for Texas that lost the most last year and have the most to replace, and so what did that look like in the spring game? We talked about the wide receivers on the offensive side of the ball. It's the defensive line on the defensive side of the ball. Like the wide receiver room, Texas defensive line lost several key contributors from last year's team, including some NFL players who are about to get drafted this coming weekend, with the NFL draft scheduled to start on Thursday. And while I don't think Texas defensive line will be bad, I think at least right now, and again, we've got 4 or 5 months to go between now and the start of the season. So I'm not suggesting that anything we saw in the spring game from Texas, draw a line to that to the fall. The players they have are going to improve, and they're looking to add additional players. But the defensive line right now at Texas is just not at the level that it was last year. That shouldn't come as a surprise or a shock to anybody, especially Texas fans. You shouldn't take that as an insult or a slight. Again, these are the same things your coach is saying post-spring game. Got to get better, got to get deeper, need more depth, need more bodies, really on both lines of scrimmage. But Texas is a supremely talented team. They're very well coached with Steve Sarkisian, and I think they're going to be one of the favorites next year, their first year in the SEC, along with Georgia, Bama, maybe Ole Miss is ranked pretty high in a lot of your preseason polls and rankings. So, can LSU rebound defensively? What does Tennessee look like? Mizzou, a 10-win season last year. So they're sort of bunched in there with that group there. I think they're going to be pretty good. And that's sort of my take on them. Again, didn't need to see much from Quinn Ewers, and we didn't see much from Quinn Ewers. Arch Manning, on the other hand, looked amazing, which I think was good to see. He didn't look great last year in the spring game when he played. If you remember, a lot of hype around Arch Manning and his recruitment. A lot of people hate him. A lot of people love him. A lot of people don't like all the attention that he got. Some people think he's not any good, and he was only rated that high because of his last name. I'm not a recruiting expert, so I pretty much have to rely on what the recruiting services say in order to judge recruits. I don't follow high school football or recruiting on that level. And when it comes to Arch Manning in particular, this is something I've said before. Is it possible that every single recruiting service on planet Earth was dead wrong about Arch Manning and that he's not any good, and that every single recruiting service on Earth was tricked and only rated him a 5-star because of his last name? I guess that's possible. Is it possible that every single coaching staff and program in the country, every single offensive staff, every single offensive coordinator and head coach, is it possible they all wanted Arch Manning just because of his last name? Is it possible every program in the country was tricked by those 5 recruiting services and that Arch Manning is actually not any good? I guess that's possible, but it seems awfully unlikely to me, and he looked really good in the spring game. Take that for whatever it's worth. Let's move on over to Oklahoma. Again, to be fair, I'm not as high on Oklahoma heading into next season as I am Texas, although I do think Oklahoma is a good team and a talented team. Brent Venables heading into his 3rd year there as head coach. Brand new quarterback this year, Jackson Arnold. We got to see him in the bowl game. More on that in a minute. And a brand new offensive coordinator as their offensive coordinator left to take a head coaching position. When you look at Oklahoma last year, and then you flash forward to the spring game and what we might see this year, and you start trying to say, okay, what do I want to see different from Oklahoma this year that I didn't see last year? Where are the areas where we need to improve? This is where I have had a huge disagreement with a lot of Oklahoma fans on this channel and in the comments section. They think I'm wrong. I think I'm right. And I think they're wrong. There are a lot of Oklahoma fans who were down on Oklahoma last year offensively and thought the defense was fine. Now, this blows my mind. I don't understand it. Admittedly, do I follow Oklahoma as close as some diehard Oklahoma fan? Probably not. But that probably makes me less biased too. When trying to judge what I'm seeing, Oklahoma was top 15, top 20 in all kinds of offensive categories. They scored 40-something points a game. Defensively, they were in the 90s and worse in every major defensive category. It was hard for me to tell a difference last year between Lincoln Riley's Oklahoma teams and the current version under Brent Venables. They had a quarterback who had an amazing year, Dylan Gabriel, who, of course, decided to transfer out. He's gone, so we get to Jackson Arnold. Again, more on that in a second. But their offense was unbelievable. Dylan Gabriel, especially after that Texas game, was in the mix for Heisman Trophy consideration. They just had an unbelievable year offensively. Defensively, they 90s in every category. I mean, giving up way too many points, giving up way too many yards, giving up way too many first downs. Literally any defensive stat you want to look at was in the 90s or worse. But you had a lot of Oklahoma fans who, for whatever reason, watched the same Oklahoma games I watched and came to a different conclusion, that all of their problems lied on the offensive side of the ball, primarily with their offensive coordinator. But anyway, you're going to get your wish because he's gone and so is the quarterback. So all that complaining you did last year about your offense is now out the window. And we'll see what you have this year now that you kind of got your way with that. As far as the spring game goes, the primary thing about this spring game for an idiot like me, which again, I'm not an X's and O's guy. I don't break down schemes or anything like that. So when I got ready to sit down and watch this Oklahoma game, what I was watching for was Jackson Arnold. How much better does Jackson Arnold look today, the spring game, than he did when I saw him play in the bowl game? Because in the bowl game, he was not good. In fact, he was bad and he was borderline terrible. He completed about 56% of his passes in the bowl game. While not horrendous, is nowhere near where your upper echelon of quarterbacks are at completion percentage-wise. And he threw 3 interceptions in a loss to Arizona. So it wasn't good. And so I wanted to see some improvement from him here in this spring game. And if you've skipped the Texas portion of this video and fast forward here, I'll say the same thing I said when I started talking about Texas. You can't draw a straight line from what you see in the spring game to what you see in the fall. There's clearly room for improvement. We got 3 months of practice and off-season camps and workouts and then fall camp. Transfer portal is open. Maybe they get some help, all that. We're just talking about what we saw in the spring game here. And if you're an Oklahoma fan and you can look me in the face and tell me you're happy with a 50% completion percentage, that's what Jackson Arnold had in the spring game. A game where he's not allowed to be touched or tackled or sacked. 50% completion percentage. I just don't think that's great. Did he look a little bit more comfortable in the pocket? Because here's the thing when I watched the bowl game. Yeah, you can point to the stats and the 3 interceptions and only completed 57% of his passes. But the thing about it was when you watched the game, he just looked uncomfortable in the pocket. Happy feet, escaped the pocket too early. He just didn't look comfortable. And there were some legitimate reasons about why that might have been. He was a backup last year, all year. He didn't get, so not only was he a true freshman, he wasn't getting very many first team reps because you just only have so many first team reps to go around, and you're going to give those first team reps to your first team quarterback, which was Dillon Gabriel. So he didn't have a lot of reps last year. Dillon Gabriel decides to transfer. He doesn't play in the bowl game, so Jackson Arnold is kind of forced into a starting role there at the end of the year. And while he had a couple of weeks to prepare there around Christmas time, that's just not a normal sort of schedule or routine. You know, you're off for final exams or Christmas break and all that kind of thing. And so you have kind of a disjointed practice schedule. So there are some value or some legitimate things you can point to about that bowl game to say, yeah, you know, he didn't look great, but he was a true freshman. He didn't start all year. He was forced into the starting role kind of out of the blue at the end. He had a disjointed practice schedule. He didn't get a lot of reps with the first. Like, those are all legitimate things to point to about the bowl game. You can't point to any of that stuff for the spring game. He's been the starting quarterback for Oklahoma since December. So all of January, all of February, all of March, all of April, all of spring practice, the 2 other scrimmages that Oklahoma played that weren't televised. You know, teams do 3 scrimmages a year in the spring game. It's the 3rd scrimmage that is televised and called the spring game. He was the first team quarterback and the starting quarterback and getting the majority of first team reps that entire time. And he comes out and he completes 50% of his passes. Again, that doesn't mean he's going to be a 50% passer in the fall, and that's not what I'm saying. We don't know what he's going to do in the fall. Again, to get back to my original point, when I watch a spring game, I go into every team's spring game with a list of questions that maybe I hope to get answered. And those questions are different based on which team we're talking about. In the case of Oklahoma, you're losing a great quarterback. You're starting a highly rated young quarterback with almost no experience. How's he going to look? That's sort of the obvious thing to look for when you watch this Oklahoma spring game. Was he terrible? No. Did he look more comfortable? Yes, he did look more comfortable running the offense, and that makes sense. He's had 3 or 4 months now in that offense as opposed to just 2 weeks in that offense heading into the bowl game. So, yeah, it looked more comfortable. 50% completion rate, though, not very good. Now, Oklahoma does one of these weird scoring structured deals where it's the offense first, the defense, and the defense gets points for a sack or a turnover or a forced punt or a 3-and-out. So looking at the score to try to see how somebody did is basically pointless. It's more than pointless. It's 100%. It's 100% pointless. So Oklahoma, look, it's concerning to me that Brent Venables has been there for this long and the defense is still that bad. It's got to get better this year. It's hard for me to judge that in a spring game. A lot of times spring games are sort of offensive showcases. It's just the way spring games are designed, the rules, you can't touch the quarterback if you have a different score. They're sort of offensive showcases, and Oklahoma at times looked really good offensively. Again, the 50% completion percentage from Jackson Arnold kind of is what it is, and you got to hope he improves some more over the next 3 or 4 months before the start of the season. And there's no reason that he can't. Like, very highly rated quarterback coming out of high school. A lot of people thought he was the most college-ready quarterback in his class. He wasn't as highly rated as an Arch Manning, but some people thought he was the most ready right away, sort of the most polished. So there's no reason to think he's not going to be a good quarterback, right? He hasn't looked great in what we've seen so far in terms of the bowl game and the spring game, but you got 3 or 4 months to go. My questions still about Oklahoma are going to be defensive. Let's assume for a second that Jackson Arnold ends up giving you 85, 90% of what Dillon Gabriel gave you last year. And I think that's fair. I don't think that's trashing any. Like, I think it's Dillon Gabriel had a phenomenal season. Okay. And that's a veteran QB that's been around forever. Let's say Jackson Arnold gives you 85, 90% of that. All right. Where are you making it up? It's going to have to be on the defensive side of the ball. I'm not saying Oklahoma needs to have a top 5 defense this year. In fact, I'm telling you, they're not going to have a top 5 defense this year. They're not going to improve that much in one season. It's not going to happen. But they've got to be ahead of the 50s, not behind the 50s. They can't be in the 90s. They can't be in the 60s, 70s. They're going to have to be, 25th, 35th, 45th in a lot of these categories instead of 90th or 95th or 105th in a lot of these categories. And at least for an idiot like me, that's a little harder to judge in a spring game than it is quarterback play or a freshman wide receiver making some plays. And Oklahoma's wide receivers looked good, for the record. What the transfer is it Purdue, Burks? He looked really good in the game. Oklahoma, I think Oklahoma's going to be fine offensively. I think they're going to score close to 40 points a game again next year. I don't know if they'll, maybe it's 35, maybe it's 36, or whatever. But they're going to have, I think their offense will be fine. I'd be worried about turnovers because I'm playing a first-year starting quarterback, right? And clearly the defense has got to get a lot better. And I'd love to be able to sit here and break down what I saw defensively from Oklahoma in the spring game, but I'd rather just be honest with you and tell you that it's kind of hard for me to judge defenses in a spring game because of the weird rules and the fact that it is basically just an offensive showcase. Defenses a lot of times aren't allowed to run stunts or certain blitz packages or things like that. So it just makes it hard to gauge. The talent level on the defensive side of the ball for Oklahoma is definitely higher now than it was when Lincoln Riley was there or in Brent Venables' first year. They've worked high school recruiting and the transfer portal pretty well over on the defensive side of the ball. So just from a pure talent perspective, Oklahoma's defense has improved over the last couple of years. Will this be the year that we see those results on the field? I think it's important that we do if you're an Oklahoma fan, because I think if Oklahoma puts the same defense on the field or anything close to the same defense on the field this coming season as we saw last season, they're looking at a 7-win season probably with the schedule that they have. They host Tennessee early in the year. It's just a tough schedule. Things come together. If Jackson Arnold clicks, can avoid the turnovers, and the defense takes a big step forward, I think Oklahoma could push for, an 8, 9, possibly 10-win season, depending on how certain key games go for them over the course of the season. But anyway, there you go. That's sort of some overarching thoughts there on Texas and Oklahoma's programs as a whole, and a little bit specifically about each of their spring games. Let me know down below if you watched the spring games, what you thought about Texas and Oklahoma, or even if you didn't, what do you think about their chances heading into 2024? Texas and Oklahoma, very interesting because of the transition to the SEC this year. So let me know down below how you think they're going to do with that, and I'll talk to you next time. Have a good morning.